Welcome to the Cross Creek On Demand podcast, a podcast for you because God is for you. What do you do when the world breaks your heart? When the headlines feel too heavy, the pain around you feels endless, and you start to wonder if God even notices anymore. We've all been there, caught between heartbreak and helplessness, wishing someone would just do something. In today's episode, we're looking at how God turns pain into purpose. Through the story of Moses, we'll see that even when it feels like God is silent, he's already at work, often in ways we can't see, and sometimes through us. Because the same God who saw the suffering of his people in Egypt still sees you, still hears you, and still moves to bring freedom and healing today. So, let's talk about it together. Let me ask you a question. What breaks your heart? Have you ever been scrolling or reading headlines and found yourself overwhelmed by how messed up the world is? Story after story of injustice, hatred, and violence. And we can turn off our phones and the TV, but then we have to face our own life, right? Facing another soul-sucking day at work, illness all around us, strained relationships. And that's when we say, someone should do something. And sometimes, because, we're such good people, we decide that somebody is us. So we post, we vent, we make big promises, and we jump in. And more often than not, we just add another mess to the world. And as we go through life, we start to realize the world will break your heart, and you can't do anything about it. Sometimes the pain is personal. Sometimes we feel it with others, and sometimes the whole world groans. And in all this, we ask, where's God? Why doesn't he do something? And last week, we saw how God meets us when we're the ones who've messed up. But what about when the world breaks your heart and it's not even your fault? When we look at the mess of our lives in the world, it's easy to wonder, has God forgotten us? And that's a fair question, and it's one God is used to. But underneath all this heartbreak, God is already moving, and we see that in the story of Moses, a man who carried the pain of an entire nation and asked this same hard question. So last week, we saw how God promised Abraham he'd give him a family, make them a nation, and give them a home, and bless the whole world through this family. And so if we fast forward a few hundred years, Abraham's descendants are numerous, but they are far from their promised land, and they're far from blessing anyone. They've been slaves to the Pharaoh of Egypt for generations. And even if they remember the God of their forefathers, they're crying out, "Why have you left us here? What about your promise?" Maybe you've prayed a similar prayer. Maybe you've sat in the hospital. Maybe you wondered when relief will come or watched the same cycles of hurt happen over and over. But if we look at the story of Moses and the Israelites, we'll see, even in silence, God is already at work, sometimes in ways we never expect, and sometimes through us. So Moses was born to an Israelite family at a time when the Pharaoh of Egypt was trying to keep his hold on them by killing all the newborn boys. And in a desperate attempt to save her baby's life, Moses' mom floats him down the Nile in a basket, hoping anyone will save him. And of all people, Pharaoh's daughter pulls him from the water and unwittingly hires Moses' own mom to raise him. And so Moses grows up in a palace. But every day he sees his people suffer. And one day he decides, that's enough. I'll do something about it. And he seems like the perfect hero, using his royal privilege to fight for his people's freedom. He's like the ancient Batman. But as so often happens, when pain and passion for justice meet human nature, we get ahead of God's timing and just create more pain. Exodus 2. Many years later, when Moses had grown up, he went out to visit his own people, the Hebrews, and he saw how hard they were forced to work. During his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. After looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid his body in the sand. Moses sees this abuse. His heart starts pounding and something snaps. He's had enough. Someone needs to do something, and he's going to be that someone. And he acts. And Moses, think about it, Moses had such good intentions, right? He dared to make a stand. He took matters into his own hands, and it took a horrible turn. Instead of bringing freedom, he brings death. He commits a worse crime than the one he was trying to stop. See, our best intentions can create the worst outcomes. And so Pharaoh finds out about the murder, and he tries to kill Moses. So Moses runs far away to the wilderness. He starts a new life. He gets married. He has a kid. And he works for his father-in-law as a shepherd. See, Moses thought he was going to be the hero. He thought he was doing the right thing, protecting a fellow Israelite. He didn't hide behind his privilege. He didn't turn a blind eye. He stepped up. And it ruined his life. And maybe you've been there. Like, God, I did what I thought was right, and now look at this mess. I just wanted to help, and now everyone blames me. I've been there a lot. Moses must have felt like a failure, rejected, forgotten, far from home, knowing his people were still slaves and he couldn't do one thing about it. But God hadn't forgotten, and he was getting all the pieces in the right place. So one day, Moses sees a bush burning that just won't burn up. And when he goes to check it out, God speaks to him out of the bush. Exodus 3. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I'm aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. God says, I have seen, I have heard, I am here, I have come down. See, when the world feels dark and injustice is rampant and the hurt is overwhelming, it's easy to think God's not there. Like he's not listening, like he's too busy watching his soaps to care about us. But in reality, God's silence isn't absence, it's preparation. Imagine a small child wakes up in the dark, alone and afraid, and she calls out for her parent. And the house seems silent, and fear grows for a second. But as she starts to cry out again, the door opens and her parent comes in and wraps her in a big hug. The child's cries weren't ignored. The parent wasn't uninterested. In fact, the child didn't know, but the moment she woke up, the parent, so attuned to their kid's noises, heard her kid wake up on the baby monitor and was already on their way to comfort their kid. See, even if he's silent, God is moving, usually in ways we can't see. And more often than not, he's preparing us to be part of the solution. Like, remember young, brash Moses, right? Ready to take matters into his own hands and fight for the freedom of his people. Well, God has used Moses' years in the wilderness to bring him to a place where he's ready to listen to another solution. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt. But Moses protested to God. Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? God answered, I will be with you, and this is your sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. So after years in obscurity, God knew Moses was ready. But now Moses wasn't so sure. He had failed once. Who would listen to him now? He had lost his opportunity. But that's just who God needed. Someone who was willing to give up their own plans, their own way of doing things, and follow him, no matter what. Moses had wanted to rescue his people his way, right away. The way that made the most sense in his world, through violence and force. But God had a different way, a way that would show the Israelites and the world not only his power, but also his love and care. It would show them that they were never forgotten and that he sees the oppressed and cares about their lives. And it was a way of love, giving Pharaoh and the Egyptians chance after chance to change their ways and choose good. Moses wanted to fix it with force. God wanted to change the world through grace, patience, and real freedom. See, God's way will always be more loving and amazing than our own. When Moses finally accepted God's invitation, God used him to do amazing things, like things we still make movies about, and ultimately rescue the Israelites and carry on God's promise that through Abraham's descendants, the whole world would be blessed. And like Moses, before we act, we need to be ready for God's way. When we see the hurt and brokenness around us, we want to rush in and fix it. We want to make a stand. We want to make sure we're on the right side of history. And those aren't bad feelings. It means you care and that you haven't hardened your heart with apathy. But if we act without first waiting for God to lead the way, it will often lead to disaster and more brokenness. And listen, God still sees the oppressed. He still hates injustice, and he is still working to set captives free. It's why Jesus came. Luke 4. The scroll of Isaiah the prophet was handed to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where this was written. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released, that the blind will see, that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor has come." He rolled up the scroll, handed it back to the attendant, and sat down. All eyes in the synagogue looked at him intently. Then he began to speak to them. The scripture you've just heard, has been fulfilled this very day." See, Jesus is the blessing God promised would come through Abraham. He is the rescuer that Moses was pointing to. He showed us who God really is. He died to ransom us from sin and death and rose again, conquering the power of evil and proving he is the true king of the cosmos, freeing us to fight injustice and hatred. And he sees you. He sees your pain, and he is ready to do something about it. God's not distant. He hasn't forgotten you. You may not even know him personally yet, but Jesus listens and cares in your suffering. He hears you even when your prayers are shouted or just felt in pain and confusion. God works in his timing. Even when we can't see the answers, God is already planning to act. And he also sees the pain of those around you and wants to do something about it. And in some way, whether big or small, he wants to use you to do something about it. And what he is planning is always better and more effective than we could imagine. So, my invitation this week, for those of you who are struggling with your own pain today, whether you call yourself a Jesus follower or not, take your pain to Jesus. Tell him honestly what you're struggling with, even if you're not sure he's listening, because he already knows. Giving it to him is your first step in trusting he's with you. Maybe even write it out. And if you're still not sure if he cares, look back on the historical fact of the cross and the empty tomb. Now, for those of you struggling with the pain in the world today, let me ask you again, what breaks your heart? What is it that every time you see it, like a certain injustice, a hurt, a situation, you feel like yelling, "Someone should do something"? That passion was probably put there by God, and he is preparing to do something through you. So name it. And then ask, "God, what do you want me to do?" And be ready for the answer, no matter if it's bigger or smaller than you initially wanted. It might be simply waiting, like Moses did, but setting aside regular time to pray specifically for this issue. It might be volunteering or raising awareness or researching with others whose heart breaks for the same thing. It might be donating time or money. Or it might be something that completely turns your life upside down. Whatever it is, when you are ready to wait on God's timing and his way, he will use you to do something. For hundreds of years, the Israelites waited for God to do something, convinced he had forgotten them. But the whole time, he was preparing everything and everyone to set his people free from Egypt forever. And he still keeps his promises. He has said that he will rush to the side of anyone who calls on him, like the parent in the middle of the night. We can trust him and rely on him and allow him to use us in his way and his timing. So imagine a life where you don't have to face heartbreak alone, where the creator of the universe loves you unconditionally and walks with you in everything. What if you didn't have to react to everything people posted? You didn't have to be outraged at everything they say you should be. But you could trust that as you walk with Jesus, stay connected to him, he will give you passions. He will break your heart for what he needs your heart broken for. And then he will show you what he needs you to do to be part of the solution. Imagine a people freed from helpless outrage, ready to love and serve with courage because we know the God who heals and saves. It's why he created the church, to be his hands and feet to heal the hurt and be a solution to the brokenness. The God who brought the Israelites out of Egypt is still at work today, moving through you, healing through you, and leading through you. Are you willing to stop running ahead or turning away and instead trust God's way, even if that means waiting, praying, serving, or speaking up? See, your heartbreak can be where God's healing begins.